Tonight on 16 by 9, is it a crime with no cost?
It's almost as if the system doesn't really care about white-collar crimes.
A whole bunch of people want to know why this man isn't behind bars. Here's Carolyn Jarvis.
Good evening and welcome to 16 by 9. He's slick, charming, and is seemingly trustworthy. But Robert Robertson is also accused of being a con man. His alleged victims say he comes to town, targets unsuspecting people, and rips them off. And if that's not bad enough, they say he's getting off scot-free. Eric Cito investigates.
This is the kind of crime that gets everyone's attention. Armed thugs in masks smashing their way into someone's home. Do this, and you can be sure the authorities will take notice. But that's not always the case for white-collar crime.
We got nowhere with the authorities.
Well, they never pursued it. The legal system actually has failed.
These people and more say they've been conned out of vast sums of money by this man, Robert Robertson. Their story begins here in Penticton, BC, a small town sitting on a large lake in the heart of the bone-dry South Okanagan Valley, often called Canada's pocket desert. For Robert Robertson, this was fertile ground. Martin Kroos had just started a modular home construction business called Home Delivery when he met Robertson in July of 2007 and hired him as a salesman.
Very likable, very charming, on first impression.
But within months, Martin says Robertson began to sabotage sales and drive a wedge between the 5 partners in the company.
Any word that comes out of his mouth is a lie. And it took us a long time to figure that out. After he was gone, I went back into his footsteps and, where deals going sideways, left, right, and center.
Martin says Robertson even told clients he was one of the owners of Home Delivery, and word started to get around.
People are going to drop a few $1 million in product, to be built by us, and suddenly they find out the guy they're dealing with is not a partner of the company.
So what happened to Home Delivery in the end?
Building got sold, company died, everybody moved on. I filed for personal bankruptcy.
For Martin, there are still reminders of Robert Robertson all over town.
Just around the corner here is the fireplace business that sold Robert a fireplace for one of his houses, and he never paid the bill.
From a small business to the police station, courthouse, and city hall, where Martin has searched for help from the authorities.
So this is the house that Robert always claimed it was his house.
Even this house brings back memories.
It is an impressive home in the inside, absolutely. It's a nice home, but it sure wasn't his.
This is part of the persona he was trying to portray to people. He owned this house, he had all this money. This is among...
Right, yeah, and it definitely was not his house. So this is actually the New Star site on the right-hand side.
Only a few minutes away, a dusty lot that used to house another of Robertson's ventures, a modular home sales company called New Star.
Down here actually is where the house was. 2-story house, about 2,200 square feet, with all the bells and whistles. Very, very nice home.
That home was later seized by a bailiff because of failure to pay rent on the property. Robertson's activities here are also linked to civil claims totaling at least $300,000.
Surprised? No. This is a typical thing. This is just a daily scenario in Robert Robertson's life.
Did you have to build it, or did it already exist when you had it?
No, I built it.
You built it from scratch?
Next, Martin drove us to the last stop on the tour. For him, it was the worst memory of all. What was once his own modular home business, now someone else's. Nearly 2 years after the bankruptcy, it's still hard to look at.
Bring back memories now?
Well, I've been by it. Talking about it is a little different, but a little difficult. It's just that, today is kind of emotional, but I'm beyond that.
Martin believes Robertson was trying to take over the company. Instead, he says Robertson's actions caused Home Delivery to begin losing vast sums of money. Martin poured in thousands of his own dollars to try and save the business, but it went under. 50 people lost their jobs, the partners lost $5 million, and that, Martin says, has cost him a comfortable retirement.
The company's gone, bankrupt, building is gone. I guess we all have moved on with our lives, or tried to move on. I just have one thing left. Robert is still walking. He will never stop until somebody stops him.
Just down the road in Merritt, BC, Harry Croker tells a similar story, saying he was also deceived by Robertson a few years earlier.
This is the plot of land that was going to be the subdivision where I was going to have my home.
Harry is a longtime city councilor in Merritt. In 2006, he was looking for a new home and says Robert Robertson came along at just the right time.
We had sold our place. We needed somebody. We needed someplace. And I think that's one of the reasons why I really got conned into it, because I was anxious to get my home. So I was just about willing to do anything to speed up the process.
Harry says he gave Robertson $60,000 as a down payment on what was supposed to be a new home for him and his wife.
My place on there was going to be right in here. This is a waterway.
He says it all turned out to be a fraud.
It's very bold of him to have come here and start doing development on property he never owned. I can't believe anybody would do that. But it's somebody that's got a lot of confidence in himself that he's going to get away with it.
The worst part, Harry says, is Robertson not only took his money, but damaged his reputation as well.
Was this embarrassing for you?
Very much so. I've been very quiet about it. This will expose it, so there'll be people out there saying what an idiot he was.
When Harry complained to the police, he says he got little help.
Well, they never pursued it. I just can't figure out why. If I would have done that, I'd be behind bars today.
As we'll show you, police in action would become a familiar complaint.
Hey, Bob, how you doing?
Hi, Martin.
Good to see you again.
Back in Penticton, Martin Croce and Dr. Bob Offer have become friends through a common goal to expose Robert Robertson.
We recognized that he had a tremendous history of conning people. He's a master scam artist.
Bob also had a very personal motive. His sister Maureen had started dating Robertson.
He had told her that he had a Mensa IQ and that he was a billionaire, and that he had yachts under renovation in Italy, and he had a fleet of airplanes in Brazil, and she was totally taken in by this.
The new couple spent one Christmas with the family before Robertson wore out his welcome.
And over time, what's happened is he's tried to sell something to different of Maureen's children.
After Maureen eventually married Robertson in Tahiti, Bob says her children cut off contact.
Her children, by and large, have disowned her. She has been unfortunately sucked into this to the point that even her friends have been conned out of significant amounts of money.
Faced with a failing business and a crumbling family, Martin and Bob decided to investigate.
Slowly we started putting the pieces together and we started comparing notes. And by golly, I mean, the stuff that came to surface was just incredible.
What they uncovered were multiple allegations of fraud in BC civil courts and witness accounts of fraud in business dealings going back nearly 2 decades. 16x9's own investigation found accusations of fraudulent dealings totaling at least $2 million. But when Bob and Martin went to the RCMP, they say the investigation went nowhere.
It's sad that nobody wants to shoulder the responsibility for taking this guy on. It's very disappointing.
And that disappointment was only beginning.
Next on 16x9, the police say he broke the law.
Through the course of the investigation, I was satisfied that Mr. Robertson had committed a fraud.
So why isn't he under arrest?
Stacks and stacks of paper, questionable business plans, civil claims, criminal complaints, and it all leads to one man, Robert Robertson.
Doesn't matter what community he ends up in, he goes in with this grandiose image and he sucks people into his scheme.
Bob Offer and Martin Crowe say they uncovered a long history of business deals gone sour.
Takes their down payments, takes their money, and leaves.
Among those deals, housing developments in BC where buyers say they didn't get their homes, an industrial chemical manufacturing business in the United States that never got off the ground. But when Robertson started making fantastic claims about a high-tech medical invention called Oxygen 4 to Bob Offer, who happens to be a doctor, alarm bells went off.
He's talking about things in the pharmaceutical industry with which I'm fairly familiar that were absolutely impossible. $700 million investments that were changing on a weekly basis between one pharmaceutical buying it to the next. This is over his oxygen technology that he claimed that had cured Magic Johnson of his AIDS.
As Martin and Bob found out, Robertson had been talking that one up to investors for years, going back to the late 90s in southern Ontario.
We found out that there was an arrest warrant for him, a fraud warrant in Toronto.
So they gave local RCMP the file they had gathered on Robertson, convinced he'd be arrested and sent back to Toronto. But that didn't happen. We wanted to find out what the RCMP did with the information they were given about Robert Robertson, but officials at the detachment here in Penticton turned down 16x9's requests for an on-camera interview. The RCMP would not confirm whether there was an investigation into the case, saying only the parties who make complaints are updated and kept informed.
What we were told was that the warrant did not extend beyond a certain mileage outside of Toronto.
The RCMP informed Bob and Martin the Toronto warrant could not be executed in BC and that it expired. But as 16x9 found out, neither of those things was true.
The warrant had not expired. It's still valid. It's still on our books.
Staff Sergeant Jeff Taylor of the Toronto Police issued that warrant in 2005 after getting a complaint about a large fraud.
It was about $290,000 is the allegation of the total monies fronted from the complainant to Mr. Robertson over a period of about a year and a half or so. Through the course of the investigation, I was satisfied that Mr. Robertson had committed a fraud, and we made efforts to arrest him. And when I couldn't find him, I took out a warrant for his arrest.
Staff Sergeant Taylor says police in BC contacted him about Robertson, so they should have known the warrant was still good. But Bob and Martin say that's not what they were told.
Now that I understand that may not have been correct information, we could have grabbed him while he was here, I'm really disappointed. I think the system has really let us down.
And the letdown doesn't end with police. Staff Sergeant Taylor says the warrant could have been used to nab Robertson in BC, but the Ontario Crown refused to authorize it.
We're willing to play our role or our part in the judicial system, certainly, and we're willing to go out there and get them back. It's up to the Crown whether they want to make that happen or not. I would just be speculating on why the Crown wouldn't return them. I mean, you would presume it would be because of money, but really that should be something for the Crown to answer.
We thought so too, but like the police in BC, the Ontario Crown declined to comment. After everything that's happened with you and Robertson, what's your opinion of him?
He's just one sick man. Has no feelings. If you would see him tomorrow, you bring up a home delivery. Nothing happened to home delivery. It's all their fault. That's what they do. They point the finger at you, at the victim.
We wanted to give Robertson a chance to explain his actions, so our producer tracked him down on the phone in Belize, where he now lives. And just as Martin predicted, Robertson blames him for the failure of his business.
He is responsible for costing his partners and shareholders $5 million and taking down the company that he worked for. So he's had a vendetta for me from the moment I walked into the door of that company, and I went there to try and save it for his partners. So he's a non-issue. I have no remorse for him, nor do I have any apology.
Nor did Robertson have an apology for Harry Croker. He says the housing development hit an unexpected roadblock and he didn't do anything wrong.
Found out that you really couldn't build because the property was absolutely totally sand.
Isn't that something that you should figure out before you start taking money for homes from people?
It is a fair question to ask, and Harry wanted to invest in the company, and he did, and I'm so sorry that he lost it. He lost. I'm sorry.
Robertson claims many of his businesses failed through no fault of his own.
All those people invested in an idea. They invested in an idea, and they knew exactly what was going on at every step. They knew exactly what was happening.
He says he isn't aware of all the lawsuits against him in BC, but he did express remorse for the Oxygen 4 episode.
If I could take anything back in my life, it would be the OX4. I seriously messed up. I apologize wholeheartedly to anyone and everyone that I misled and misinformed and deceived on that deal.
So what happened to the money?
I have no idea, really, Mr. Leffler. I really don't know.
Your wife and her family, I mean, she doesn't speak to her children anymore. Do you feel any responsibility for that?
Absolutely, I do. And I can't tell you how much hurt and pain that causes me every day.
For those who count themselves among Robert Robertson's victims, that apology rings hollow.
There's a lot of people that have been affected by this. Money-wise, retirement-wise, income-wise, family-wise, and it keeps on going.
In a perfect world, what would you want happen to Robertson?
Well, I think he should be put away.
I really wanted the police to pick him up and charge him with fraud.
But they didn't, and so Robertson still walks free.
It's almost as if the system doesn't really care about white-collar crime. It's like the buyer beware thing. Well, if you buy something fraudulent, that's your problem.